Good to see you. We are going to be in the book of James, but before I begin, Pam has given me a card that she wanted me to read for all of you because I think she'd probably cry, maybe, when you're. But she wanted to tell everyone thank you for last week. If you were here in Pam's retirement celebration, we had a wonderful time. I learned some things about you that I didn't know prior to last Sunday. So she did write this in cursive, which a lot of people can't read cursive anymore. But I still am able to do that. I'm old enough. So just a note to say how much I appreciated everything for my retirement celebration to everyone who was involved in the planning, the prep, and the party. I like the alliteration too. And the cleanup, thank you. It was so special. I was extremely touched by all of it. So we're glad that we could do that for you, Pam. So if you weren't able to be here last week, make sure you voice your appreciation for Pam before you go. Now, a couple other announcements here. Number one is if you would like a sermon journal for next year. Again, I forgot to bring mine with me. If you have one, if you hold it up in the air, wave it like you just don't care. All right, there you go. So those are what they look like. Just if you would like a sermon journal, if you're not familiar with them, we print them out every single year for the following year. So if you would like one for 2026, there's a sign-up list out here on the table in the foyer. Make sure you sign up, put your name, how many you need, and put that on the list there for that. Also, we are going to be having Christmas Eve services, surprisingly, on Christmas Eve this year on December 24th. We are going to do two services. So just to give you a heads up, usually one service is more heavily attended than another. So we will be having some signups for that just so we can make sure we have enough seats for everyone on Christmas Eve. So make sure you're planning for that as well. But today we are in James, and we are continuing our series entitled Faith Works. And I'm going to share a statement with you. It's how I started my doctoral dissertation a number of years ago, and it was this, that conflict is inevitable. Conflict is going to happen in every single person's life. If you've not had conflict in your life, you're not old enough. Okay, so all of us at one point or another, we are all going to experience conflict. And I remember the first real fight I got into. I was in 5th grade, and it was after school. It was at recess at the end of the school day, and we were out on the playground. We were playing pickup football. I mean, this was the field where legends were made. And so this particular day, I actually got to be one of the captains. And so I got to pick the team. And in my mind, I knew exactly which boys were going to be on my team, and I knew which boy I was going to pick first. And I had in my mind that I was going to get the first pick. And however, I didn't take into account that there was also Mike. You know Mike, right? He's the kid with the buzz cut and always seems to get whatever he wanted. And so we're standing there, we're getting ready to pick up teams. And in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to get the first pick. And Mike steps forward and says, I'm going to pick first. And inside, I had just had, those internal conversations that you have with yourself. I'm a 5th grader, and I'm thinking, all right, I got to stand up for the little guy here. He's not going to get his way this time. I'm going to get the first pick. And so as soon as he said, I'm picking first, I said, no, you're not. And the crowd got quiet. I think to my right, there was a boy that went, ooh, okay. But anyways, the Western music started playing in the background. I said, no, you're not. And immediately a fight broke out. Now, when I say fight, it meant that we grabbed each other's arms, we fell on the ground, and we rolled around for a little bit. And as we're rolling around on the ground, our teacher blew the whistle like she was officiating the Super Bowl. And it was a loud shriek, and we were both placed on the bench next to the teacher for the rest of recess. And that was the first fight I'd ever gotten into in my entire life. Now, I tell you that story, and then you're like, that's kind of silly. And now standing here as a early 50s adult, I say, yeah, it is kind of silly. But the strange thing is that I still do that. Like, I don't roll around on the ground with people anymore, right? But I still find myself in conflict with people. And as I was thinking about that, I thought, you know what? Every single person that I've had a relationship with, at one point or another, I've had a conflict with. I've had a conflict with my wife. I've had conflicts with my wife. I've had conflicts with my children. I've had conflicts with employers. I've had conflicts with employees. I've had conflicts with neighbors. I've had conflicts with friends. As I thought about this, I thought every single person that I've had a relationship with at one point or another, I've had a conflict with. And I don't think I'm unique in this, because I think that all of us understand that conflict is inevitable. That if your conflict may happen at home, it may happen in the workplace, it may happen in the neighborhood, it may happen in your friend circle, but conflict is inevitable. And here, what we're going to discover in James chapter 4 is that faith works peacefully. Real faith, is going to manifest itself in trying to produce peace even in the face of conflict. And that real faith, is going to it's going to work in such a way that it produces peace in relationships. Faith works peacefully. And the take-home truth that we're going to discover here today in these first few verses of James chapter 4 is that we fight because we are not right. We get into conflict because we are not right. We're not right on the inside, which causes us to not be right on the outside, which demonstrates that we're not right above us. And here's what I mean by this, is that inside of all of us, we have this pride, we have desires, we have wants, we have dreams, we have wishes. And when those things aren't met by another person, or another person keeps us from achieving that, what happens is that we're not right with that other person, and conflict erupts. And for the life of a believer, it is a demonstration. Our conflict with the people around us is a demonstration that things may not be right between us and God. And so what we're going to discover here in these verses is that we fight because we are not right. And you can take that in all the ways in which it is intended. We fight because we are not right. Now, this is, as I said, a continuation. This is the penultimate message in our series entitled Faith Works. And we are looking in the book of James to see how real faith is manifested in real ways. That if you have a real faith in Jesus, that it ought to be shown in your words and in your actions, in your endurance through difficult times. In every aspect of our life, faith ought to reveal itself in a specific way. And the question, or the statement that we've been looking at as we've gone through this series is that if I say that I believe as I should, why do I behave as I shouldn't? That real faith should produce real results in our life. And so our memory verse is James chapter 2, verse 17. I mean, this one is so easy. You should have it memorized by now, even though this isn't the normal way we talk. But anyways, even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself. All right, let's try that. I'm gonna help you, give some prompts. Faith, if it has no works, is being by itself. All right, next week you're going to know it all word for word. Even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself. What good is your faith? Your faith is worthless. Your faith is lifeless. Your faith is useless if it isn't demonstrated and manifested in some specific ways. And so week one, we saw that faith works persistently. And we saw that all of us face disasters and difficulties and discomforts in our life. And we learned there at the beginning of James that what God does not remove, he is going to use. He's going to use what he doesn't remove. So we learned there just to be patient. Allow that endurance to work its way out in our life, and it's going to strengthen and it's going to mature our faith. Week number 2, we saw that faith works impartially. That unacceptance of others is unacceptable to God. That we are not to look down on people, or that every single person that you see has been created in the image of God, and as a result, that requires our dignity and our respect of that person. And so I told you that week to let love be your law. Just ask yourself the question, what does love require of me when I'm dealing with this person? Week number 3, we saw that faith works actively, where we saw the memory verse that faith without works is dead, and real faith is a revealed faith. It's going to reveal itself in some ways in your life. And so we encourage you that third week is to just make an honest assessment of your faith. Is what you say you believe actually what you believe? Because it's going to be demonstrated in how you behave. And last week, I don't know if last week was convicting for you. Last week was extremely convicting for me, but we learned that faith works audibly and how you and I need to control our tongue. And that there we learned that our tongue is this fire that burns within us, and the words that you say never go away. They stick around, they hang there. And so I encourage you to think before you speak and guard your tongue. And I don't know about you, but it was extremely convicting. And this week is not any less convicting for me. And maybe it's going to be the same for you as we discover here today that you and I fight because we are not right. Now, James chapter 3, James addressed the issue of the tongue. And basically, when we got to the end there, if you remember, I said, hey, the tongue just simply demonstrates and displays what's inside of you. Remember, I had the glass of Gatorade up here, and if I got bumped, what's going to come out of the Gatorade? It's what's inside there. Our tongue just simply reveals what's already on the inside. And here, James says the reason why we use those harsh, biting words, those words that burn down relationships and burn the people around us, the reason why we say those things is because within us, there's some things that are not right. And we say these things in conflict with other people. And here he wants all believers to discover that you and I fight because we are not right. So we're going to jump into it here, James chapter 4, beginning at verse 1. And what we see here, first of all, is the source of conflicts. Now, it's easy for us to say that oftentimes we're in conflict because of that other person. I mean, if they would just act reasonably or if they would not be so demeaning, then maybe we wouldn't be in conflict. But what we're going to discover here is that the source of conflict may be a little bit deeper and a little bit more directed towards you than you would like to care to admit. And so it starts here in verse 1, and James asked the question, what is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? What is the source of this? And naturally, when we read that question, our response ultimately, very quickly, oftentimes is them, right? If they were more respectful, if they were more thoughtful, then we wouldn't be in conflict. If they weren't so mean, if they were more generous, then we wouldn't be in conflict. And oftentimes when we say, hey, the reason why we're in conflict is because of that person, right? And think about it, right? You say, hey, I'm in conflict with my spouse because they're not thinking about my needs or what I desire. Or, hey, I'm in conflict with my kids because, they think they know it all. They just won't help out around the house. Or, hey, I'm in conflict with my parents because they're just so controlling in my life. I'm in conflict with my boss because, he doesn't really consider how much value that I bring to the company. Or I'm in conflict with my neighbor because they won't honor the property line that separates us. Or I'm in conflict with that guy that drives that white truck and cut in front of me as I was driving down the road. Or I'm in conflict with the cashier at the grocery store because she's taking so long to check out all my groceries. Like, it's always them. Now, if you came here with somebody, I want you to look at that person. All right, look at them, point to them and say, it's all your fault. Okay. See how natural that was for you, right? Like, that didn't feel weird to you at all, didn't it? It's easy for us to say the reason we're in conflict is because of them. It's their fault. And James, as he asked this question, said, now, before you start to blame everyone else, you need to stop, you need to pause, and you need to do a little bit of self-reflection here. He said, what is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is not the source your pleasures that wage war in your members? You know what James is saying here? The reason why you're in conflict is not necessarily all because of them. It's also partly because of you. And what James is saying here, he's saying, hey, we're in conflict because I'm not getting what I want. It says, is not the source your pleasures which wage war in your members? That word pleasures is literally where we get the English word hedonism. Hedonism is this philosophy, this way of life, this thought system that says that pleasure and the absence of pain is the ultimate goal, the ultimate pursuit in life. And here James is saying some of the reason why that you're in conflict with this other person is because you are not getting what you want. Now, again, James is not making an argument here about the legitimacy of what you want. Like sometimes what you want could be extremely legitimate. Like you could be saying, hey, all I want is I want them to keep their promise. I want them to be faithful. I want them to not lie to me. Like, but James is saying, you're on the right track here, because some of the conflict, the reason why you're angry with this person is because you're not getting what you want. And again, I understand some of you right now are starting to push back on this, and you're thinking already, well, that person really did do me wrong, right? My husband really did act selfishly in that moment. My wife really did embarrass me in front of those people. My parents really are controlling over every aspect of my life. My boss really did deny me the promotion that I deserve. Like, it's not the fact that these things are legitimate or not. What he's saying you need to understand something here. The reason why you're in conflict with this other person is because you're not getting what you want. It's not about the legitimacy. And oftentimes, what we want is extremely legitimate. But what James is saying, he's saying you can't control what other people do. You can't control what other people say. You can't control how other people react. But you can control you. And he's saying here, if you can come to the point where you're in the midst of conflict and you just say, all right, I'm going to take a time out here, because what I need to do is I need to stop and I need to figure out what is it that I want that I'm not getting. It may not necessarily resolve the conflict right then and there, but what it'll do is it'll help kind of lower the intensity, the temperature of the conflict, right? Because now you're able to identify, what is it? What is it that I want that I'm not getting? James says, hey, the source of your quarrels and conflicts is the pleasures that wage war in your members. You have all this stuff that's going on inside of you, and you want something, and you're not getting it. And then he went on in verse 2, and he said, you lust and do not have. Now, as James goes through here, he's going to progressively intensify the words that he's using. And so here he said, you lust. It's not just that you want something. Now he says you're craving something. You see the intensity here. You lust after something means you're desiring it. You're craving it. It's not just a matter of one. Now you're craving it. He says you lust and do not have. So you commit murder. And you're like, what? Like, I don't think I'll ever go that far where I would crave something enough that I would kill someone. And it's important to understand that James wrote this letter to believers like you and I, right? Now, there are some people who think that James is addressing a very specific situation where somebody did murder someone else. There's other people who think that James is just being hyperbolic here. Just helping us to understand that when we crave things, that they're going to start to, these desires, or once we start to crave them, they're going to start to control us, and it's going to lead us to ultimately, possibly, destroy the people around us, and especially the people that are closest to us. I've seen conflicts where one person destroyed the other person's reputation. I've seen conflicts that destroyed relationships. I've seen conflicts that have happened between parents and children that have destroyed the child's self-confidence. He says, you need to understand here that when you not getting what you want, that this want is going to turn into a craving. And when it becomes a craving, you may not literally take their life, but if you don't identify what it is that you want or what you're craving, it could possibly lead you to the point in which you're going to destroy that person so that you can ultimately get what you want. He says, you lust and do not have, so you commit murder. And then he intensified it even further, and he wrote this. He said, you are envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. That word envious is literally translated to be zealous for something. And so James says what started out as just a want has now become a craving, and that craving has now become an obsession. And at this point, once it becomes an obsession, once you obsess over something, you're going to do whatever you have to do in order to get what you're obsessing over, no matter what it does to the other person. And again, I want to go back here again, because some of these things that you want and you desire and maybe you're obsessing over may be completely legitimate. And I'm not denying that, and I'm going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. What James is saying, he's saying, I just want you to take a time out here and understand that part of the reason that you're in conflict, part of the source is this internal source within you that you're not getting what you want. And you fight because you're not right. So the first few phrases here, he said the source is an internal source. But then what we're going to see here, he says also the source is a spiritual source for believers. And he said, you lust and do not have, so you commit murder and are envious and can't obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. And the implication here is that you don't ask God. Now, you could maybe take it, hey, you don't have it because you're not asking that other person, which sometimes can diffuse the conflict just in a practical sense. Like if you just said to somebody, hey, this is what I want that I'm not getting, they may be able to say, I didn't realize that. They give you what you want. But the implication here that James is making, as we're going to see in context, he's saying you don't have because you're not asking God. James is basically saying to believers, he said, did it ever occur to you? Like before you start shouting and screaming and calling names, doing all of that, fighting and quarreling, did it ever occur to you to pray about it? Did it ever occur to you to pray, God, I just ask that you would change my husband's heart and he would help me out more around the house with the kids? God, I'm just praying that you would change my wife so that she would understand all the sacrifices that I make for our family. God, I pray that you would change the situation at work, that my boss would understand the value that I bring to the company. James is saying, did it ever occur to you that you don't have what you want, what you're craving, what you ultimately obsess over because you do not ask? Did it ever occur to you before you storm in the door, start fighting, quarreling, to just say, God, this is what I want, and I'm asking you to intervene in a special way. God, I just ask, God, I pray my kids would find better friends. You don't have because you don't ask. And some of you are sitting here right now and you're thinking, I have asked. I've asked. I've asked. I've asked. And the situation doesn't change. And actually, in some ways, it seems like it's just getting worse and worse and worse. James was ready for that pushback. And so he wrote the next words. You ask and do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives, so that you may spend it on your pleasures. James says there are some of you that do ask. The situation hasn't changed, because you're just asking selfishly. You're asking God to intervene just so that you can get what you want. And sometimes our favorite prayers are this. It's a 3-word prayer, right? Sometimes our favorite 3-word prayer is this: God, change them. God, change my son. God, change my spouse. God, change my boss. And those are our favorite. That's our favorite 3-word prayer. You know God's favorite 3-word prayer? God, change me. God, change me. You may have one of the books that she's written. Stormy O. Martin, she became very popular when she wrote the book, The Power of a Praying Wife. Then she wrote a follow-up, The Power of Praying Husband, The Power of Praising Parents, The Power of Praising Kids. I think there's a whole line of them now. But she said that she came to this realization in her life that she spent so much time praying that God would change her husband. She realized that in that whole process that God, more importantly, wanted to change her. And she said this, she said, maybe, just maybe, him changing me is the catalyst that God uses to change him. And maybe, just maybe, the conflict that you're in today, maybe the catalyst that God wants to use to change that other person that you want to change so desperately, maybe the catalyst is the fact that God wants to change you in order to change that. And James is saying, hey, some of you have been asking, and you don't have it because you're asking with the wrong motives. You're asking God to change them when ultimately you should be asking God to change you. He says this source, he said first source is an internal source of conflict. There's a spiritual source of conflict, but in any case, we fight because we're not right. We're not right inside. We're not right with the God who is above us. We fight because we are not right. But James went on, and it's actually several verses later, and he gave the solution of conflict. It doesn't matter if your conflict is with your employer, your employees, your neighbor, someone that lives in your house. James says there is a solution to this conflict. And it's a solution that oftentimes we don't like, and oftentimes we want to balk at, and we just want to hit the brakes and say, well, that's gone too far. But the solution is found in verse 10 of James chapter 4. He wrote these words: humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you. In the midst of all this conflict, James said, hey, just stop for a minute. And the reason why you're in conflict is because of your pride, because you want to be right, because you want to make sure that you get your way. And James is saying, hey, just stop there and humble yourself in the presence of God. Literally, make yourself low so that God can raise you up. And again, we want to do the exact opposite. We want to prove our point. We want to show why we're right. We want to make sure that we get what we deserve. And God's saying, just humble yourself before me. Because just maybe, you're trying to squeeze out of that other person something that you're only going to find in me. So humble yourself and allow me to raise you up. And so I want to stop here because I learned this probably about 12 years ago, and it revolutionized the way that I look at conflict. It's a yummy view of conflict. Imagine your entire conflict that you have with this other person as a big pie, a big, delicious coconut cream pie, okay? Yeah, everybody's going to want more conflict now, right? All right, so imagine your conflict is this big pie. And you and I are old enough, everyone in this room, you're old enough except for maybe the baby in the back, but all of us are old enough to understand that not every conflict, it's not 100% the other person's fault, right? In every conflict, each of us has some culpability in it. And so what James is saying here, he's saying, humble yourself before God and admit what your slice of the pie is. There it is. Mine, if it's coconut cream, I'd probably take a bigger slice. But just acknowledge and admit, humbly acknowledge and admit what part of the pie is yours. Now, again, we never want to talk about this because we always want to talk about the other person's part of the pie. Well, what did they say? And what did they do? And how did they react? God's saying, no, you can't control any of that. Humbly acknowledge and admit your slice of the pie. And your slice, listen, I'm giving you all the benefit of the doubt. Your slice of the pie may only be 1% of the pie. Maybe 99% of the other person's fault. But what God's asking you to do is own 100% of your 1%. You've got to own it all. You can't control that other person's part of the pie, but you can absolutely acknowledge and admit your 1% in that. Hey, I shouldn't have responded that way, or hey, I shouldn't have said that word. Hey, I probably should have prayed for you more. Whatever it is, acknowledge it and admit it. And what you're going to discover here is that when you can get to the point in which you can acknowledge and admit, hey, there's something in this conflict that I want, that I crave, that I'm ultimately obsessing over, that I'm not getting. And you can own your part in it. It helps to diffuse and resolve conflicts. And we fight because we are not right. So, because that's true, what should we do? Romans 12:18 says this. It says, if at all possible, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. And Paul in Romans here, he's acknowledging the fact that it may not be possible. And there's going to be a whole lot of this that doesn't depend on you. But Paul's basically saying, hey, I want you to own 100% of your slice of the pie here. As much as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. And so in light of that, what should we do? I would encourage you today to be a peacemaker. Be a peacemaker. That's not typically our natural result to conflict. Typically, everybody falls into two categories. Some of you are spewers, which means that when you're in conflict, everyone knows it. Like you send the emails, it's all caps, all underlined, all boldface, okay? Everyone knows that you're angry. And you're the people who say, yeah, I get angry and I blow up and it's all over. Yeah, just like a nuclear bomb, okay? Same way. And then there's others of us, we're the stewers, right? And when you're angry, everybody can see it on your face and they'll ask you, are you upset? And we like to use every synonym in the dictionary. I'm frustrated, I'm irritated, I'm disappointed, but no, I'm not angry. And we just hold it inside, and it's like a pressure cooker, and eventually it just explodes, and then people are like, you're upset over a bad haircut? Like, I don't understand it. Because spewers, they will express, and stewers will suppress. And what God is asking all of us to do, if you're a spewer or a stewer, is to be a peacemaker. Now, I have here on the screen, we're going to go through these pretty quick. I'm running out of time, so go ahead and put them up there. So a peacemaker chooses addressing over avoiding. A peacemaker doesn't just sweep it under the carpet, especially this is what stewards do, right? They just like to avoid it. But peacemakers say, hey, there's a problem here. Let's talk about it. What is it that you want that you're not getting? Here's what I want that I'm not getting, and let's just address it. Peacemakers choose humility over hostility. These are the spewers. Instead of getting angry, just shouting and yelling, I'm going to humble myself. I'm going to own my part of this. And then peacemakers choose restoration over resentment. All right. So I want you to be a peacemaker. It wasn't mean to have peace. Okay. I came up with a little acrostic here for you because I had to think last week. Everybody enjoyed that. So I got peace this week. Okay. So peace. P stands for pray fervently. Well, let's follow James' example here. And before we start yelling and screaming and getting into conflict with each other, how about if we just stop and pray? Pray for your heart. Pray for your attitude. Pray for what is it that you want that you're not getting. Just pray fervently. Secondly, E is extend grace. Understand that you're not perfect. Understand that other person isn't perfect. Be gracious in these situations. A is address humbly. Just simply come. I mean, Jesus talked about this. Before you go remove the speck out of your brother's eye, what do you say? Get the beam out of your own eye. Understand that, express that humility. C is calm tension. You ever seen tug of war? Two sides are pulling on the rope. What happens when one side lets go of the rope? Releases the tension. Some of you just need to let go of the rope and say, you know what? I don't need to be right. I don't need to get my way. Just let go of the rope. Calm the tension. And then E is encourage unity. In my doctoral research, the world is obsessed with conflict resolution. How do we resolve conflicts? How do we move past the conflicts? What I discovered is that's not what God has called Christians to. Not just simply to resolve conflicts. We've been called to restore the relationship. Right? You can resolve a conflict and still not have a relationship. Christianity calls us to restore the relationship. Think about the greatest conflict in the history of the universe. It is the conflict between sinful man and a holy God. And God intervened. God took the first step and he said, I'm going to come to you first because you can't come to me. And God took the first step and he sent Jesus into the world to die on the cross for our sin, to resolve the conflict between us and God. And he died and he rose again from the dead. To those who would place their faith in him, they could have peace with God. But God said, I don't just want to simply resolve the conflict. God said, I want to restore the relationship. To the point at which the scriptures tell us, as many as received him, to them he gave the right to be called the children of God. God didn't just simply reconcile the conflict. He restored the relationship. God has called all of us in the same way to be peacemakers. And when we are peacemakers, we point people to the ultimate Prince of Peace, Jesus the Christ. And we fight because we're not right. So be a peacemaker. And imagine the difference it would make. Think about the most recent conflict you had with whoever it was. Imagine how it could have gone differently. You and that other person would have just simply stopped for a minute and asked each other the question, what is it that you want that you're not getting? Like teenager, you want to blow your parents' minds? When you start getting a fight with your parents, just say, hey, Dad, let me just stop here because I realize that there's something I want that I'm not getting. Imagine dads, moms saying, hey, we're in conflict here because I'm not getting what I want. Or your spouse, or your neighbor. We fight because we're not right, so be a peacemaker. And listen, you will be glad that you did. What is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is not the source your pleasures that wage war in your members? Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you. Father, thank you today for your word. I know the conflict is inevitable, but I pray that we would follow your example, bring about conflict resolution, but ultimately relational restoration. And so I pray for every single person here. I pray for those who are in conflict, even right now. I pray that the truth of your word would sink deep into their hearts. I pray for anyone here who may still be in conflict with you because of their sin that has not yet been forgiven. I pray that they would seek me out or someone from the church so we can share with them how they can have a restored relationship with the God who created them. But whatever the case, I pray that you would move and you would speak, you would convict, you would change, so that we all would have a faith that works peacefully. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.